I am back with another installment of my brief looks at different scopes. This time, so I have a new version of a Delta Stryker 4.5 to 30 by 56. This one has locking turrets, so turrets go up and down. I still have the Delta 5 to 50, that's allowed to go back on a gun, so it's probably the last video you see it in for a little bit. Ares ETR 4.5 to 30 by 56, about to go back on a gun, I'm more or less done with it, one more test. Steiner P4Xi 4 to 16 by 56, I've been talking about it a little bit, I'm almost done with this scope. I like it, I'll talk about it a little bit more. And I have a Meopta Meostar R1 3 to 12 by 56. I'm not testing this scope per se, but the cool thing is that it's one of the prototypes Meopta has with their new dichroic reticle. And this is my chance to take a look at it and just kind of have a first impression. This is not the final reticle, it's just some dichroic features so that I could take a look and see how it works. So that's very exciting for me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to share through the scope pictures, but I'll take some with the rest of them. Anyhow, we are in a broad daylight now, where most really modern scopes look pretty good. My favorite target is that church over there. I'll point you so you can see what I'm looking at. So the church over there, that's where I'm looking at. So a lot of the church shows up in a lot of my different pictures and stuff like that. Just to be clear, I've never had a gun pointed at it. Usually when something is pointing at the church, it's rifle scopes on a tripod. Just to be clear. Like these things. So, what can I tell you about these? Well, first of all, I'm going to point the camera the right way. First of all, I want to point out that we're in the middle of a California winter. This is a frigid winter day. The temperature has plummeted down into high 50s, low 60s. In other words, for my buddy Jason, who lives in North Dakota, this is pretty much beach weather. But for us, it's winter. Back to scopes. So the interesting thing I wanted to look at is how the P4Xi stacks up to the rest of these, because it's a scope I haven't really paid much attention to. It is a strange configuration. It's a 56mm objective rifle scope with a, by modern day standards, so what's called a moderate magnification range from 4 to 16, right? The Delta, for example, is 4.5 to 30, right? The Athlon, 4.5 to 30. That seems to be kind of the range, but I'll be honest with you, I don't shoot at 30 very much, right? Most of the shooting I do is between 12 and 15, 10 and 15 power. I do like high magnification sometimes to look at the conditions, but ultimately I don't need it that much. My favorite scope of all time that I use all the time is a Tangent Theta 3 to 15 by 50. So 4 to 16 by 56 seemed like an interesting configuration that I wanted to look at. And one interesting that happened was when I tried to figure out, so what does this scope compete against? There's really not that much. Most of the rifle scopes in this magnification range have either 44, 42 or 50mm objectives, not a whole lot of 56mm ones, and virtually none in this price range. There are some inexpensive Chinese scopes from the BSAs and Leapers of this world, and I don't spend a lot of time with that. Chinese scopes are getting better. I see better ones from a lot of different makers, BSA, Leapers, and Barska, not among them. With the European scopes, there is the Hensoldt 4 to 16 by 56, which I've tested in the past, which is a spectacularly nice scope, which weighs about the same as the Steiner, has about the same field of view. It is about 1.5 inches shorter, and it's a really fancy $3,500 scope. Then there is the Schmidt & Bender Polar PM2. Schmidt is adapting their polar scopes that have incredible 96% light transmission to the PM2 configuration. So, and there are two of those, 3 to 12 by 54 and 4 to 16 by 56, and physically it's in about the same size as the P4Xi, and that's also like a $3,500–4,000 scope, between 3 and 4 somewhere. I'm sure it's remarkable, I'm sure it's wonderful, but it's expensive, right? So in trying to find something to compare the P4Xi to, I failed miserably. This configuration does not exist in this price range, and P4Xi, you know, I think MSR, typically I've seen it sold for about $1,400–1,500. It seems to have gone down. I see it in a few places right around 1,000, and I have a suspicion that, you know, Steiner probably gonna keep it in that price range for a bit. And for $1,000, this is a raging bargain, and for $1,500, it's a good, really good scope. For $1,000, it's hard to do better, especially if your application involves low light, right? Basically, if you're in a low light, you don't need very high magnification. You need a large objective. You need a good optical system, and there the P4Xi really does well. It's easy to get behind. The IP is good. The turrets seem to track. Illumination is reasonable for low power. And one of the things it does well, the way it does distortion is kind of interesting. So if you get behind the scope, especially on lower powers, let's say I'm going to go on 6 power, and you get behind the scope, and you move your head a little bit, you'll see the outer part of the image kind of swim a little bit as you move your head within the exit pupil. You'll see this sort of geometric distortion start popping up, and this distortion is important. And why it's important is not so much for shooting with your primary aiming point. It is pretty important if you're using the tree to hold over it. One of my common complaints, for example, about a lot of Horus reticles is that they extend this tree all the way down, and even if you try to use it, they are not corrected for parallax, not corrected for distortion. When you move your head, the reticle and the image do not move together. It's a pain in the ass. In the P4Xi, although it's not a tree reticle, it's an SCI reticle, the way they do this, the sweet spot is pretty large, and then the edges move. Not like all scopes move, right? Delta is also pretty good about this. If I go on the same 6 power, look at the Stryker 4.5 to 30. Once again, the part where the tree is really well controlled, and as I go to high magnifications, I am at 15 now, and I do a lot of shooting at 15 power. 15 power is where you see virtually all of the tree. When I move my head, I can use any part of the tree for aiming, and the parallax that I corrected in the center is still corrected about 10–12 milliradians out. The Ares ETR, I am on 16 power here. Should be about 15. When I look at this, I'm corrected for parallax in the center. Distortion is reasonably well controlled. But on the outer edges of the tree, in the very bottom, I see the dots moving a little bit. So can I use this entire reticle for wind and hold compression? Almost entire. But basically, it's a 10 milliradian tree, and it goes, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 milliradian out. So 10 down and 4 to the right or 4 to the left. I have to be careful. You know, when I have, honestly, like, I don't use the tree to shoot that far out typically, right? When I need to shoot to distance that requires 10 milliradians of compensation, I will twist the turrets for at least some of it. I frequently adjust the turrets and then use the reticle to work around there. So also quite respectable. I have seen a ton of scopes where people, manufacturers put in this enormous tree reticle, goes all the way out, and again, on the outer skirts of the reticle, there's distortion, there's movement, there's uncorrected parallax. If you correct the parallax for the outer edges of the tree, you're not corrected in the center. You know, it's nice to have a sophisticated reticle, but it's, you have to, the scope, the optical design of a rifle scope has to be good enough to accommodate all that reticle complexity. Right? In other words, you have to think about it as the whole system, not just we'll slap a fancy reticle in there and it will sell like hotcakes. Well, it probably will, because every mall ninja is going to buy one. but it doesn't mean it's a useful thing. It doesn't mean it's a good thing, right? For example, at SHOT Show was looking at Night Force's Mil XT reticle, which I like quite a bit, but it extends like 20 or 30 milliradian down. If you look carefully in the scope, I don't remember whether it was a 5 to 25 or 7 to 35 I looked at. If you dial down to lower power, where you can see all the way at the bottom of the reticle, or close to the bottom, and if you look at it, if you move your eye, it's clearly uncorrected parallax and strange distortions. Why do you need the grid down there? Getting back to P4Xi. So I've spent some time with it in the gun. I like the scope. It held up well, it stayed zeroed, it tracked accurately. I'll do some more tracking tests. But now I put it in a tripod because I want to do some basic, just looking at things, and I'm going to do some low light testing later tonight. And so far I like what I see. There is a little bit of chromatic aberration, but it's not excessive. And for the price range it's pretty reasonable. So the church that I'm looking at has these nails, spikes on the roof so that birds wouldn't sit there. And that's my standard test for chromatic aberration. I look at those things, and they're sharp, a bunch of sharp edges going in a few different directions, and there is some magenta and some yellow chromatic aberration, but this is a pretty hard test for almost any scope. Also on 16 power with the delta, there is some yellow. I don't see magenta with the delta. There's a little bit of yellow chromatic aberration, but it's a very bright white building and white structures on the dark background. You'll see them on everything, right? On the RS ETR, there's a little bit of so yellow-green, a little bit also chromatic aberration. It is kind of everywhere. I feel that for the money, it is really well controlled. Resolution is good. With this scope, I can see stuff. Right now, I've turned away. I'm looking at some houses that are 2 miles away. I can see an impressive amount of detail. The colors are rich and vibrant. The color scheme is very neutral. On the Delta, it's very slightly cooler. On the Steiner, very slightly warmer, but it is pretty neutral. I can't really complain. The only other thing to add, I'm going to do a low light test and I'll write it up, but the only other thing to add, it is not a small scope, right? So if you're looking at this thing, Steiner, delta 4.5 to 30, delta 5 to 50, Optical 3 to 12, and Athlon ETR 4.5 to 30 by 56, all 56mm objective scopes. This is not a small scope. It's about the same size as the delta. It is lighter though, it's about 30 or 32 ounces. So weight-wise, it's a reasonable package. It's not super small, it's not super big. It's kind of in the ballpark. ETR is a little bit longer, simple objective. Optical 3 to 12 by 56 is a fair bit more compact, but it doesn't have side focus, right? It's a simpler scope, it's a hunting scope. So my initial impressions of the P4Xi are quite good. I'm going to spend a lot more time with it, but so far it hasn't hiccuped at all. It's done everything I've asked of it, and I'm going to do a low light test. And I'm going to do additional tracking tests and see how it goes, but I've added it tentatively to my list of recommendations. I like this scope. It seems to work well, and really the configuration, magnification range and objective is really quite unusual, and I think it's definitely worth consideration. Thank you for your time, thank you for watching. I really appreciate the time you spent looking at my videos. My audience is growing, and I have to thank you all for being willing to listen through my usual stream of consciousness. Thank you.